Good afternoon, buenas tardes, welcome. My name is Diana Riza, and my pronouns are she, her, they. I am the newly appointed Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Southern, and so privileged to be here today to facilitate this conversation from talk to action. Southern students and alumni take the lead on racial justice and structural change. Before we begin, I want to reverentially affirm that the lands on which we live and work are the original homelands of Pocasset and Quinnipiac communities. We strive to honor as well as respect the diverse Indigenous people connected to these lands with gratitude for the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout these generations. I also want to do a special shout out and thank you to Professor Jonathan Wharton for kicking off a beautiful forum last June that I believe is going to be a continuous series around anti-racism and anti-oppression, around structural change and how we continue to do this work moving forward. Special thanks to the Integrated Marketing and Communications team, Student Affairs, the Office of Alumni Relations, so many staff and faculty that got us here this far. I would also be remiss if I did not really talk and do, again, another special shout out to Solomon James, who claims he had never organized anything in his life other than a birthday party, as well as Chian Carrasco, who were engaged in local organizing this past June after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and unfortunately so many other Black, brown, and transgendered lives who were lost to police brutality. There are others leading the good fight who are not able to join us today, including the SCSU Club Crescent players for working with the theater department to commit to anti-racism, as well as challenging the department to actively combat homophobia, Islamophobia, transphobia, sexism, and anti-Semitism. So the focus of our talk today is to listen and learn about the types of student and alumni activism going on at Southern and in our local communities. Moreover, we hope to inspire each of us with how we can amplify our voices to move us to a sense of hopefulness and change. Each panelist will have an opportunity to introduce themselves and share what it means to be an activist and what they have done to fight for structural change. We also address the recent resurgence of activism and how this feels so different, as well as provide at the end an opportunity for panelists to entertain questions from the audience. With that, let us begin. Jane.
Hi, my name is Jane Marler. I'm currently a senior here at Southern, majoring in communication disorders with a minor in Judaic studies. After my graduation, I hope to go on to earn my doctorate either in audiology or a master's in speech pathology. I am the current president of the Cultural Competence Club here at Southern. In the upcoming semester, I hope to work with other students and faculty members to broaden our understanding of different worldviews and cultures, especially as it pertains to our future in healthcare or education fields. Off campus, I have been working with an organization called Footsteps based out of New York. Footsteps volunteers offer a variety of services for those wishing to leave their ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities. I work as an academic tutor for those looking for help with achieving their GEDs or taking exams such as the SATs. In recent months, I have also been working with Black Lives Matter groups in neighboring towns who are working to plan peaceful protests and other events within the community. I feel really honored and excited to be a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to participate on such a wonderful panel. I am really excited to be sharing this panel with fellow alum, faculty, as well as our wonderful thought young student leaders. My name is Shantay Hanks. I'm a proud active alumni of Southern Connecticut State University. Southern helped frame my worldview. While a student, I was president of the Black Student Union, NRA, a student activist. I ran for local political office in New Haven. I wanted to give Southern students a voice downtown. They tend to forget about us in that corner of the city. And after graduation, I remained on campus as a hall director while I was pursuing my master's degree. I got the most out of this campus. I earned 3 degrees at Southern and currently have 2 nephews attending. Because I consider Southern my second home and still have many friends who I went to school with while there that are now administrators running the campus, I am committed to the school and see many parallels and similarities between what students are experiencing today to what we experienced over 20 years ago. But to be clear, although there was adversity and frankly, lack of diversity and tolerance in some areas, my rewarding experiences and relationships built here far outweigh those challenges.
Thank you, Shantay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Gonzalez Cruz. I am an undocumented immigrant from Mexico, and I graduated from Southern in 2018, and I completed my bachelor's in economics and mathematics. And after graduating, I went on to pursue my master's in quantitative economics, and I recently graduated. And currently, I am part of the Husky for Immigrants campaign, which is pushing for Governor Lamont and the state legislature to open access to Husky coverage for undocumented immigrants, especially during this time of COVID, which I will talk a little bit further on. But I am also very excited to simply share this space with other people who are actively working to improve the lives of the people that they love in their community.
Gracias, Jonathan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jamil. My pronouns are he, him, his. My major is communication. I am currently a senior here. I have served on the BSU and NAACP. I'm also currently a senior resident advisor of North Campus. While I'm here, I have done at Southern about 3 or 4 semesters worth of my own independent research around race relations, systems of oppression through the lens of oral history, family lineage, trying to understand urban trauma. So that's kind of where I come in as my lens, understanding more of the historical analysis of what's happening today. And I'm extremely excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, Jamil.
My name is Jasmine Martinez. I am a senior athlete here at Southern. I am on the softball team and I'm majoring in psychology. My activist work includes attending protests and really using my social media platform to bring insight on the injustices that are happening within our society and spread information to the community and my following. I am also a part of a newly formed group here at Southern called Athletes Fighting Injustice. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited for these conversations.
Gracias, Jasmine.
Hi, my name is Naya Mesidor. I'm a freshman student athlete here at Southern, and I play volleyball. My pronouns are she, her, and they. And what really brought me here today was I did a lot of work within attending a lot of protests within Black Lives Matter and protests for LGBTQ community. I just feel that after personal hurdles I faced in my life and people I've seen that what they have dealt with, I wanted to do something to make a change within this world. There's a conversation that is needed, and I'm here and ready to work, and I want to be part of that conversation. I want to push that change as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Naya. Simone?
Hi, my name is Simone Davis. I am a Southern Connecticut State University alumni. Most of my experience has been focusing on generational trauma and the intersectionality of class, gender, and ableism. And my time on undergrad, I started to understand a lot more of my community. And being from New Haven, the Dwight Clinton community, I started seeing different systems and how they oppress people that I knew in exploitation. And that kind of helped me cultivate a lens for anti-racist work. And being at Southern, I was offered so many opportunities and resources to just expand that knowledge and to learn how to strategize with those skills that I gained. Since my undergrad, I graduated with my MSW from Fordham University last year. Since then, I've been trying to develop strategic plans around identifying and addressing how institutional racism impacts the learning experience. And I've participated in teach-ins in New Haven. I've attended local town hall meetings that are around policies pertaining to education, to employment, to police accountability. And currently I'm working at Citywide Youth Coalition and supporting Defund the Police campaign. And we're really trying to find ways that New Haven can leverage our relationships instead of kind of relying on the police.
Thank you all. Thank you all for those comments. I want to start with maybe with a kickoff with the first question, and I'm addressing this to the alums, but certainly I want our current students to weigh in as well. The question is, from your lens, what does it mean to be an anti-racist and activist for structural change? And the key is structural change. I mean, I know we talk a lot about activism, and we talk about it in all the ways that you have and how you've done that, but how anti-activism or anti-racism for structural change? Shantay?
Well, from my point of view, let's break this down first. Anti-racist means being an active participant in the quest to abolish racist power structures. So not being racist versus being an anti-racist, in my opinion, are distinctly two different things. Anti-racist is an action, it's intentional. It means not or no longer being passive. Ignorance is bliss, as we know. But now you know, racism exists. Racial injustices exist. So to me, you know, it's a huge, it's been around forever, right? Since the inception of this nation. So I think we should start right in our inner circles first. I think your friends, coworkers, classmates, neighbors, they've all told you either directly, right, or via their social media post. And let me say, sharing and liking is not being an active participant, okay? This does not qualify you as an anti-racist. It's a very passive way of feeling like you're involved, but that's not it. To be an anti-racist, you have to be intentional. So my suggestion is even a quick social experiment. Have you been told by even one person their personal experience with mistreatment, abuse, bias, or due to their race? If you have not had one conversation with a person of color, specifically an African American, you need to do better, because that means you have been complicit.
Thank you, Shantay. Jonathan, you want to weigh in on that from your lens?
Yeah, I like to emphasize a point that Shantay had mentioned, which was about being intentional. And I think a place that everyone could start at is looking at what biases and prejudices they themselves have been taught, whether it's through their family or through their friend circle or whether it's through their school. Because I think everyone has a role in unlearning and learning new like unlearning the bias and prejudice that they did learn, and then understanding how to then like address those issues that are present in your community. For instance, like I grew up in North Haven, which is a very predominantly white district, and being an undocumented immigrant, like no one knew that. And so whenever people would make like immigrant related jokes or anything, like it's because like they were growing with that, right? And so when I became very vocal about you know, immigrants' rights, a lot of like I had friends who were saying how like they hadn't viewed it from my perspective, or like they didn't recognize like what it actually meant. So I think being intentional about like unlearning the prejudice and biases that you grew up with is a very good place for people to start with, and then using you know, like what the new things that you learn to then improve you know, like the conversations or anything around it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Simone, wanted anything to add?
Yeah, I would just have to agree with Shantay and Jonathan. It's being intentional, and also like with activism, right? You have the root word act, and it is actions. You have to be actively involved in learning different issues that might not directly affect you, but it affects the people in your community as well. And being vocal about that, not only being vocal, but being intentional about, well, who can I deliver this message to? Who can I get in contact with to address this issue? Not only to just echo it, but how am I activating myself as an individual to really look at this issue? And yeah, being actions really matters, being involved in a community and really knowing like the ins and outs of how things function is how you really get an understanding of activism and anti-racist activism too.
Any others who want to weigh in?
I would say the main piece, right? I think a lot of us touched on this. Anti-racism isn't this badge you get on your shirt once you reach a certain plateau. It's an active state of mind. It's a commitment to dismantling racism from our social structures, from our institutions, right? And we can do that a number of ways, like we talked about, you know, challenging your own biases and prejudice, and then educating yourself on how racism is systematic. That is the second piece. And then the third piece is taking action, right? It's calling out racism when you see it. First, on an individual basis. So when you feel safe and you are watching an interaction and you see there's some biases there, it's calling that out. You know, in person, in your social circles, it's holding other people accountable. And then the second piece of that is dismantling racist policies. We have to look at our local neighborhoods, our local institutions, like our education system, like our university, looking at our policies and going, hey, which one of these policies may have bias? Because of this policy, the result is this. What is wrong with this? We have to look and analyze these policies intentionally. Even though a policy may not seem blatantly racist on the outside, it can still have racist outcomes. So it's identifying those policies, abolishing those policies, and then replacing and flooding our institutions with policies that are actively anti-racist. And when we do that, we know that it will lead to racial equity.
Thank you for that. I wanted to move to the second question, and I know that we're going to come back later to this because for as much as we all know that anti-racist work is never ending, and it takes mindfulness and intentionality, sustain it for a long period of time. As we know, there's so many individuals that don't know how to start this work. And again, we'll say more about that, but also they don't see this, they don't see how they're in this. How should this be impacting their world? Am I part of systemic racism? And they just don't know. They don't know better. You know, how do you identify a policy when you don't know better? You know, from the beginning, you can see. I don't see anything that looks racist or looks like it would hurt anybody. We're gonna talk more about that, but I want you to be thinking about, you know, for the beginners, because activism is a big word and it's a long commitment. How do you start that if you don't think of it on a regular basis? We're going to get there. like, I want to turn to this other thought, and it's been brewing in my life for quite a bit of time, in this new activism that's happening in this country. And I mean, I see it across all campuses. Now, I've lived and worked on a lot of campuses over my time, and I'm not going to share my age, even though I'm up there, but I can say that the activism years ago, and I'm not saying 50s, mid 50s, or even earlier civil rights, this recent activism is different. It feels different. And you have more college campuses being engaged in this work than ever before. You know, the New York Times, and I'm going to quote in one of their articles, says that this renaissance of political activism going on hasn't existed on all campuses in the same way. And they say that this resurgence in campus activism is necessarily new, that in 2012, we saw with the Occupy movement that students and people from the community, and I remember New Haven, tents all over the parks, speaking out and saying enough is enough. Observers say that activism since then has a different feel, like I've been saying, and this new chapter could trigger significant shifts. It's not just individuals of color, it's not communities of color, our white folk, coming into the fold. So why do you think that is? And maybe we could start with our current students at Southern to say a little bit more about that, and anybody can jump in. But what's going on? Why this new activism? What's going on? What's going on?
Yeah, I'll start. Well, I'm not surprised by this resurgence, right? We know that college-age students are the face of every movement historically, right? I feel like currently there is a sense of urgency to mend the racial traumas and injustices that are currently happening. And I know for me, being a first-generation African-American male, activism for me isn't optional. It's not something I can do in my free time. Activism for me is saving my life. It's saving the life of my community. And that's what I think my generation is seeing, that this is not just about me or you, it's about us. It's about us united. And we are moving to fight our injustices as a larger community. And we are seeing this across the nation, not just college campuses, because we know what happens at college campuses represents what's happening in our state and in our nation, large scale. And so I think what you're looking at on college campuses, you're seeing young people standing up and saying enough is enough. And this is how we want change. This is how we want our to look like. And we are taking that into our hands.
Jane, I want to pull you in a bit, if I may. I know that you've been doing some good work, I would say great work, with the faculty and in your academic, in your academic discipline. And I was talking earlier about what theater department is doing with students coming out and saying we need to be more inclusive of the curriculum. How do we show up in hiring more faculty of color? And can you say a little bit more of the work that you're doing with the faculty in your department? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, especially in my major, as well as Jamil had mentioned that there's not many Black faculty in the communications major as well. I think what we face as future healthcare professionals and education professionals is we're not being taught of how to work and how to be sensitive with patients, students, families that we may work with in the future. And I think that it's such a huge piece of what we should be being taught. It's not just about the anatomy or the science. It's about knowing how to work with these patients and having good bedside manner and being sensitive and aware of and in order to make these connections with our patients or families in the future. So as a department, I think we're hoping to incorporate some of that more in our curriculum, as well as in clubs. I think it's about time that we start, incorporating that. I think it's very important.
This activism, and I, if anybody wants to also, any of the, Jasmine or Nia, any of you who want to join in and say a little bit more about, some of you have just joined Southern just recently. You just are newcomers to the community, and why this activism going on? Any thoughts around what you think is going on?
Well, what I think is going on is just that it's just as what it is. It's enough is enough. And we're in this time and age where technology is kind of reaching its peak. Like, we have video cameras, we have stories from other people. Like we can't just, we're not waiting on letters or like notes from people that are going to take 3 months to get to us. We have messages, we have like email. Things get to us quick, and people realize like this is the chance. Especially in college, students, like, I think the biggest thing is a lot of students realize they don't want that kind of life when they're older, especially for their kids. Because I believe when it comes to this kind of work, being human is what makes it different from other animals. Is being human is we have emotions that provide us to do the extra mile than what another animal does. Another animal does, they fall in love because they do it as a survival tactic so that their species keeps going. We do what we do so that our species just live life, just to feel that kind of love. And for us they realize with everything going on, just to discriminate against another person based off of how they're perceived or how they want to be perceived, it's inhumane, because it has a lack of morals, and I feel like this kind of work is important so it can save our humanity, save this entire country, save this world, so that if we want to keep our species alive, like, we can't have all this hate. It's got to stop, and this is the perfect time for it.
Thank you for that. I want others to weigh in, and this is one that, since I arrived at Southern, people have been telling me that Southern is not an activist institution, that this was back in the day, way back when folk were really, voicing their opinions. And I have had people tell me this, that there is no such thing as activism on our campus. I really want to open this up to everybody, because I feel that if you aspire to be a social justice university, an anti-racist university, an anti-oppressive university, you got to have student activism. So, alums, tell me a little bit more about why, is this true? And please, anybody, I'd like everybody to really share their thoughts on this, because this is bothering me. I can tell you, this is really bothering me.
You're good. That was good, because it's, that struck a nerve with me. So this is definitely not a new phenomenon, and to the points that all the students have mentioned, the student movement has historically been powerful, right? It's been a political force in many countries, in particular this one. To Naya's point, students are numerous and not difficult to organize, especially when you have strong, legitimized organizations that are headed by young, charismatic, well-prepared leaders, such as these students here at Southern. The internet and social networking tools they have at their fingertips, and they've used that to facilitate their quick coordination. So, when we talk about history, nearly 10 years ago, the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian conducted a series of interviews with youth of the civil rights movement that were as young as 12 years old at the time, and college students as well. There are many stories that we all know of courageous young people, in addition to stories like Ruby Bridges, the college students from A&T University that started the sit-ins at the Woolworth counter in Greensboro. There are many, many stories about the efforts of students that were activists, and they continue on campuses like Southern, and even with organizations like the students movement that are working with grade school students. Now, you mentioned the Occupy movement, which was not that long ago, right? There's many parallels between the Occupy movement and this current movement. It started in the US and prompted synchronized protests that took place in more than 900 cities around the world. Timing influenced the eruption for both of these movements. The Black Lives Matter movement, the George Floyd murder was the final straw. And the BLM protest resonated around the world, just like the Occupy movement. Subsequent protests took place in other countries. Both movements were the result of a combination of long-term historical factors that caused, issues to erupt in people, it's in particular young people on college campuses, to say enough is enough. Now, during we were suffering two pandemics during that time, right? So the students that were your college students that typically would be on their college campuses, they were home. They were distance learning at the time, but they're young people, college students nonetheless, and they drove many of those protests. And the bottom line is, it's all because of the triggers that are present. There's education inequity, there's strong feelings about injustice, there's issues with our government. And to quote Dr. Cornel West, he referred to the Occupy movement as a democratic awakening. And in contrast, I would say the BLM movement has been referenced as a revolution and a renaissance. So they're very similar. And I look to and I applaud the young people that are taking the lead here, and will continue to.
Ooh, thank you. Others, please. Thank you, Shantay.
I think when we're talking about the university being active in these issues, I think about it from two perspectives. One is how to get like more students involved, and then also how the university itself could be more engaged in it. And so I'll start off with the student perspective. I think the best way for somebody to get involved is to simply find an organization or a club that is working on the issue that you're interested in. Because just as if you were to start a new instrument or you start a new sport, you don't go into the field or into like the setting already expecting to be a professional at everything. And so that's why these organizations like Citywide Youth Coalition or the one that I joined, which was Connecticut Students for a Dream, like we help people understand the issue and then further be able to use their own truths or their own stories to then advocate. And everyone starts out of a different position. Some people are already right off the bat ready to speak at rallies or testify at the state capitol, and others still need a little bit more of an introduction to organizing and the issues. So I think joining an organization or a club where people are willing to help you grow in that aspect is a great place to start. And so in turn, the opposite side of that is like the university's perspective. And I think if you want to get students and organizations to be active in the school, then you have to provide them resources that extend beyond just a classroom. You also have to, quite frankly, like give them money. Like I cannot tell you how much money is needed in organizing, how much money is needed in everything, because organizations, we actively compete for a limited amount of grant money, and that grant money, it's not big, it's not very accessible. And so universities have the obligation to give money to their students to be doing this work, because I cannot tell you how many times I have done a presentation, I have gone to different universities to speak on an issue, and all I have gotten was a thank you. Thank you is not going to pay my bills. Thank you is not going to pay the gas that I used to get to that university. So I think if the university really wants to be more active, it is honestly giving your students money to do the work.
I want others to talk about this because I know they're ready. They're ready. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would also like to speak on this. It's coming from two perspectives, as a student here at Southern and as an athlete here at Southern. When we talk about how there's a lack of student activism, when it comes to me being a student here at Southern, I see activism every day in many forms. But when I talk about on the athlete side, I've been a part of athletics for the last 4 years now. And I know the majority of our players are white and come from a predominantly white town or neighborhood. And many of our players of color don't feel supported by their own teammates in this fight. We have athletes who are not necessarily afraid to speak up, but they feel discouraged. That's what I find, is that athletes are very discouraged on speaking on this issue. You know, we have athletes who feel that if they speak up, they won't be heard. And if they are speaking up, they find that often people around them are silent. So if that's been a common trend within athletics from at least the time I've been here, then how could there be a form of activism? And if that's potentially been a theme on campus for many people, then how could they be an activist when they don't have support around them? Like nationwide, recently, our professional athletes found a way to address injustice the most peaceful way possible, which instantly turned controversial, and that's kneeling during the national anthem. What would that look like for our athletes if our athletes decided to advocate for social justice in that form? Like, what kind of light would be shed on them? Would they get backlash from the Southern community? Would they get backlash from outsiders? Would they get backlash from their own teammates and coaches? It's like, what light would be shed on that university? But more importantly, would our officials support our own student athletes for that form of activism? So when we talk about how student activism may be a thing of the past, I know it's not a thing of the past. I know it happens here at Southern, but I just find that more times than not, our students, especially student athletes, feel very discouraged from advocating. And ultimately, it results in less action being shown.
Yeah, I just want to say I do see the duality between like the students when we talk about student activism on campus, and also the staff and faculty on the other hand. And I feel like with student activism on campus, it happens a lot of times in silos, and you see different activism or different groups organizing with different issues. And a lot of times, if you're not part of that organization or that community on campus, you're kind of like out of the loop. So it's like you might want to be involved, but you don't know when they're meeting or what's their demands or who's supporting what. A lot of times there's like a lack of, well, not lack of communication, but there's probably most of the time miscommunication, and the advertisement for the organizations are usually like very poorly done. And on the other hand, with the faculty and staff, I do feel like, from my experience, there's a culture of elitism. And whenever issues are brought forth that are around classism or just being oppressed, it's kind of like it's discouraged. And I can understand why a lot of athletes don't want to engage in like those conversations, because it's like you don't know what the risks or the implications are going to be after the fact. And even with faculty and staff, where they're like, well, you know, I would support you, but I can lose my job, or I don't know how this might like play out. So there's so many different barriers in being in a higher education and culture and community that I feel like there's a lot of pull and pushback. But I do feel like the help of understanding that even though we're a community on campus, there's so many more communities around us that can be helping us build that student activism and support that student activism.
Yeah, going off of what Simone and Jasmine. Oh, no, you can go. My bad. Sorry.
Something happened. Yeah. But is it just, there was some noise going on, but I don't know if that, is that background on your end? You want to try it again, Nia?
Yeah, no, I thought Shantay was going, so I stopped because.
No, that's good.
Wait, no, just going off of what Jasmine and Simone said, like being a student athlete is so much mental work. And it's like, and then when it comes to being an activist, the work that goes in between that, it's a lot of dedication, because as soon as you open up about that stuff, being an athlete in general, you're working out constantly, and then when you go to say your views, it's, oh, you're an athlete, what do you have to say? It's hard because they're just gonna think, oh, you're just me, or you're just here to win. There's various things, like LeBron James, he tried to get into activist work to explain how because he has a very big following and he uses his social media platform. He uses whatever power he has to try and speak out and say that this enough is enough. And a reporter said, just dribble the basketball. And being an athlete, you have to go the very extra mile to be heard, because now not only are you battling people who feel that you're just a jock who just needs to know to stay in their lane, but you also have to battle that student part. You have to battle the fact that there are people who feel like it's a threat in some way because it's too many things under your belt. You're reaching out to various communities, and then you have teammates who feel like I know personally from experiences, it was very hard for me to even do anything within sports and being a student, because I had teammates and friends at the time who felt like it was just a preference kind of thing. It all goes back to that being anti-racist and just not racist. Being anti-racist is being intentional, and being intentional meaning like you gotta dedicate yourself to it, you gotta drive yourself through it, and there's gonna be those hurdles that are very hard, and they're gonna be very tiring. I know, when it comes to Southern campus, I ended up playing volleyball here because the coach wants to. Her name is Coach Barbara and Coach Marche. They both are dedicated to being anti-racist. They realize what's going on in this time and how much the community has been attacked, not just through racial injustice, but through health injustice, their injustice health-wise with COVID. There were people saying that Black people or people of color create corona, and that to stay away from them. And how does that make me feel as an athlete, to feel like there are people who look at me different when I'm just here to play the sport? So I'm like, that's unfair. Why do kids? We gotta work harder to create that equality. And where Southern stands right now, activist wise, it kind of sucks because not a lot of staff members that back that as well, because they feel like they'll lose their job. But I can see a change. I've spoken to several staff members so far, and the change is really there. The rise is coming, and I'm really ready for it, because although there's going to be those times, especially right now, where everything's up in the air, no one has a specific answer because things keep changing. Southern has chosen to stand their ground. They really have. And that's really all I can say on that part.
I just want to add really quickly, too. When we're talking about student activism, people often forget we are also students taking 5, 6 classes. Most Southern students work 1, 2 jobs to pay their bills, right? And activism, like Jonathan said, does not pay the bills. So often, this is what I really need from my university in order for us to move into a more anti-racist. We need to start funding multicultural organizations like we want them to do the work. If we want multicultural organizations and we want student activists to be on the front lines at protests, to be in the background in committee meetings, looking over policies, we have to, 1, pay them like we want them to work. Because if students are doing this work, they're doing their classes, they're doing their internships, when are they sleeping, right? It's almost like volunteer service. And now we're burning out students that can make this university truly a better place. We need to fund our multicultural organizations. They have very limited budgets, but we expect them to do magnificent things with very little money. We also have a lot of organizations on campus, so there's a lot of competition. We know Southern students do not have much free time. So there's plenty of ways they could spend the little free time they do have. Do you want them to fight activism or go make some cupcakes? So you kind of got to incentivize that with some money. And our university needs to put some money behind these initiatives, need to hire more students to do this work, put some real financial gain into that. I heard a quote before. It said, our budgets it showcases our morals. So if our morals are anti-racist, then so should our budget be. Our budget should show that. We should be putting lots of money into anti-racist work, into trainings for our faculty, into trainings for our students. Why are student employees really the only ones getting that kind of training, even around social justice? So if we want to be anti-racist, we need to fund anti-racism, to fund that work.
Ooh, so thank you. Oh, wow, we could take that to the next level. And I want to shift the conversation a bit. Oh, you just left me there for a moment, like I gotta sort of get my bearings, like refocus, Diane. I want to turn to, if I may, to the audience. They were able to shift. There's some questions that they are asking us, and from activism, we started with activism being a needed piece of our work in battling anti-racist and anti-oppressive work. We also know that the glass is half empty, that there's a lot of work to be done. So one of the questions, there's a few, but let me start here. One of the questions is the following. Studies have shown that Black males succeed better in classes with Black male instructors. If we are committed to helping our Black male students to stay at SCSU and graduate, what is being done to recruit and support Black males as teachers, department heads, and administrators? Now, I know everybody has to have something to say about this, but as we're thinking about the glass half full, we know that diverse faculty, it's like fulfill our learning outcomes. If we were all of one gender, or if we were all of one race, a lot of research doesn't say that this is good for us, but this individual is saying, what are we doing to increase our recruitment of Black faculty? So can anyone, and Jamil, you can jump in, but anyone else can follow. A lot of you have a lot to say about that. And anybody want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I'll start since I'm African-American male sitting here. I'll start. It's so important that we have diverse faculty, period. If we want to be a social justice institution, we need to show that by who's working here. Not only faculty, but also administration. I'm sure we'll get to that later. In my major of communications, there's no African-American male teaching there. I have been, throughout my time at Southern, sometimes the only Black person or one of a handful of us sitting in a classroom. I have never had an African-American teacher until this semester. The last time I was taught by a person that looked like me, I was in 6th grade. That was the last time I have sat in a classroom and looked up to somebody and they had the same hair as me, the same skin color as me. There is so much power, and I think our university doesn't quite understand that. For students, when you can sit in a classroom and be taught and mentored by someone that looks like you, someone that's from the same communities as you, who understand the struggles and barriers to education you are facing, because Southern students face true barriers to education, whether that's hunger, whether that's being a first gen. There's so many barriers to education that our students are dealing with. And we know that professors end up mentoring their students. The faculty at Southern has been so sweet to me over the years and have really mentored me. But I can imagine how impactful and profound it would be for me, who want to one day enter higher ed, to look up to a Black man who were already in higher ed teaching, where we can have those conversations about being Black in these white spaces, about having those conversations about how to navigate the classroom. It is not something we talk about enough. And I know our university has said in the past, we are working to recruit more. We are working to recruit more. We want to see them. And we don't want them to quit after they're hired. We want them to stay here. We want them to enter not toxic work environments. We want to protect them and encourage more to follow. So it's not, let's just hire some Black and brown people and that solves the issue. No, we have to look at also our departments to make sure it's a safe place they're going to and not a toxic work culture. So we don't hire and they leave and then we just keep feeding that system as well.
I'm not calling anyone. I have to believe there's others who have some thoughts about this.
Well, as we know, Jamel brought up some really strong points. I echo everything he said. And I actually want to pick up right where he left off, the importance of the support that those Black faculty members need. It's not just about, to his point, of just hiring them and that's it. The funny thing is the college campus is a microcosm of the real world. Well, what Black faculty feel when they get on a predominantly white institution's campus is very similar to what the students feel. Like the students, Black professors are confronted with numerous challenges and problems at PWIs. Studies have shown that Black professors at PWIs face that same isolation from their colleagues that Black students often feel from their classmates. Expectations of intellectual inferiority by white students and white faculty members, marginalization of their research by their colleagues, sometimes lower pay, biased critiques on their classroom effectiveness by white students and white professors, among other things. So they face those same issues. So we would need to not only recruit the same way we do students, right? But we need to put in place retention, the idea of keeping them and making them feel comfortable on that campus. And we all know the importance, and I appreciate the question, whoever posed that question to the panel, because we know there's studies. I even saw a study from the National Center for Education Statistics. Nationally, Black professors represent 6% of collegiate faculty. The percentage is even lower on PWIs. Yet, we also know, because studies have told us the importance, it's vital for the success of Black students that they have Black professors on the campus. So I think that, to Jamil's point, it's paramount. And it's something that the universities, especially, if they want to move towards being a social justice university, they have to actively and intentionally recruit those faculty and staff and administrators and make sure that they're comfortable on the campus, the same way they also have to intentionally do that with their Black and brown students. The fact is, academic performance and achievement by Black students is directly linked to the support they receive at school. And this should actually come as no surprise. You can do studies in human development theory to know this. So I would like to see that from Southern, and it's really interesting and very profound that the same, as I started, the same issues and concerns that are happening on the campus with students today are the same issues and concerns that we were advocating for over 20 years ago. A human diversity requirement in the curriculum. Those are things that, today I'm hoping that I'm able to see it and actively be involved with you, Diane, to see that come to fruition.
I thank you for that. I know we're close to the hour, and there's another question that I think would be, not that we can end with all the answers, but another question from the audience is the following: what can we do as a whole to finally make things feel equal and not divided? Now that question, we could take hours asking that, but I'd like to, think about that for a moment. What can we do as a whole to finally make things feel equal and not divided? Now, there's not more to it than what does it mean to feel equal and not divided? I know that the issue of faculty recruitment and retention, I thank you both, and I know others have thoughts about that, but it's years ago it was an issue and it's still an issue. What I find is that we are doing better, but we're not doing well enough when you don't see enough students in your classrooms. If you're not seeing enough folk of color walking campus, that there's something not enough. Where is the enough? Where's the benchmark for that? And there's work to be done. But can you speak to that for others? Again, I don't want to, if I have to repeat the question, what can we do to finally make things feel equal and not divided? Your thoughts. Any thoughts around that?
A thought I feel is that if we have to feel equal and not divided, is that we have to work on empathy and being able to assimilate ourselves in other people's shoes, especially from communities of non-color. because even just talking about just the professor thing, my major is psychology. Do you know there are less than 20% of, I think it's like about like 6% of psychologists that are actually Black or of color. And that is due to the lack of teaching and due to the lack of feeling like they were a lot of Black people were comfortable, and because of the environment and the mentality that was given to various communities of color. And when it comes to this talk of being anti-racist, it's got to come from being empathetic and being able to understand the other side. Even on our side, like it sucks because there are people who are racist and it's hard to talk to them, but getting to know their side point of view and life is very important as to why my life matters just as much as theirs. It all starts with empathy and being able to say, I get where you're coming from, but let's have a conversation and try and see eye to eye and level with each other. Because feeling like you can at least develop that respect is where we can start and build a house that is meant to be anti-racist.
I'll also go off of what Naya just said with empathy. Ultimately, for there to be a change, you have to make a change within yourself. So if you're not changing the way you carry out your daily actions, how are you going to change society around you? If we want society to be equal and there finally to be a level of equality, what are you doing to ensure that equality exists around you? Are you calling out implicit biases when you see it? Are you calling out your family for things that are said, your friends, people around you? What are you doing? What actions are you taking to ensure equality exists? There can't be a true form of equality if no action is taken. But essentially, it starts from every individual and holding people accountable around you.
Oh, Jasmine. Others.
I would like to, tie back to the previous question and this question as well. I think as someone who is coming from my position should be to be a listener and to be a learner, not really to be a leader in this conversation. And I think the same really applies to discussing the faculty. And like, I just don't think that topics such as, sociology or history of the Black community should be spoken from the mouth of a white professor, right? It's not really our place. So I think that adding Black faculty members to the university can work to kind of tip that balance, back and to create a more equal community within our campus.
Jane, you make a very good point, because I've heard that from students too. Who can speak, who can authentically, and this is, what does it mean to be authentic? To speak on behalf of the voices of our community. And we know historically that ethnic studies, I used to teach in ethnic studies, there certainly were not enough faculty of color that were teaching in those departments. Black studies, Africana studies, women and gender studies. If you look historically at these disciplines, it has been misrepresented by folk of color. And so how do you make up for that? And, you're making we could have a whole topic on what you just said. And maybe that's a good conversation for another forum. Who speaks on behalf? And it's hard because students don't want to be singled out. Faculty don't want to necessarily be singled out, or staff or anybody to speak on behalf of the whole community, right? As well as whites don't speak on behalf of whites. But I think that you're raising a very important issue of speaking to the reality of identity and community, and who does that? How do you balance that so there doesn't seem to be a disbalance? So it's such a good point you're making. I know that there's so much to say, but I have a question for all of you, for me, before we close. And this is my question if I were a participant. I'm the new VP. I'm supposed to fix every problem on this campus, right? Not, but, right?
I thought that's what you were hired to do, Diane. I'm sorry. I thought it was your charge. Okay. We got to talk about that.
That's another forum. That's another forum. But I think that each of you have one recommendation for Diane moving forward. What would be that one recommendation? Because I will be sharing with all of you in the community the strategic recommendations and priorities in the way that I've heard them, in the way that I've seen them, and the documents that I've read in the 2 months that I've been at Southern. So there is a plan that is coming out in a couple of days, and everybody's going to get that, including alumni. What do you have for me? What do you think I should be doing this year? What's my focus? Okay, come on.
I have one, but you added this one just now, so it's a bonus for me. I would love to go back and continue the conversation of what Jane mentioned. As a history major at Southern, I think it's important to talk about, learning these different disciplines from a lens of someone that really can't teach, in my opinion, from the same perspective in which I can learn it. So you know what I mean? It's definitely worth a whole nother panel discussion on this, because I transferred to Southern from an HBCU as a history major. And it was culture shock for me to go from being on an HBCU campus in Atlanta, Georgia, learning history, sociology from professors that looked like me and had that lens that I needed to learn from, and then come to Southern and it become more of a supplement and taught by, kind of an add-on piece, African studies taught by a white male professor that had never traveled there, had no perspective. So that's a whole nother conversation. But to answer your question, I have looked over, so far what you're doing in terms of bringing the campus into this whole new space of being a social justice campus. And so I would like to say that what I'd like to see, and we've been talking about being intentional and active and action, I'd say to move in that direction, we have to have a culturally based curriculum, provide targeted support services for our students, administer, we talked about this, I think an annual, but even a biennial campus-wide survey on race and inclusion. Our last survey was 3 years ago in 2017. Look at how the climate has changed in this country on college campuses in the last 6 months, never mind year. So I think that we need to do that at least biannually, every other year, every 2 years, and create retention and achievement plans for both students of color, in addition to recruitment and retention plans for faculty and administrators of color. All of that for you to do, Diane. Yes.
I can do this. I can do this. Jasmine, come on. What do I got to do?
Going off of what Shantay said with the development of curriculums, I think it's very important, and it's actually shocking and kind of alarming that Southern, as a social justice university, has not implemented this yet. And I feel it's very important for both the sociology department and history department to be required to teach Black history and LGBTQ history. Why is this not being taught? Why should I have to gain my information from movies and through Hollywood? This should be taught in our schools and through our curriculums. So that's my recommendation, is that we have some form of curriculum built for this.
Thank you. Others.
I feel like my recommendation would be defining and creating an anti-racist system of accountability that goes for faculty at Southern, that goes for students. This should be done through like student affairs, where race-based issues come up. Like, how are we holding the faculty accountable? How are we holding students accountable? What resources are we providing students? How are we mediating the issue? How are we educating? I feel like it's creating an anti-racist system accountability would define what should be done when this happens, and also how to support an anti-racist campus.
Thank you.
For recommendation, I feel like, so there's when you go, in order to become a student and to not put any of your grades on hold, there's a not anymore test. I feel like there should be some kind of test implicated about like racism and LGBTQ community and anything that's within the minority community, because we're sending out we're sending out doctors, lawyers, people who are very key to today's society, and they cannot be racist, because there are various instances where there are people of color who were discriminated against and ended up dying, losing their lives because a doctor felt like, oh, they're being dramatic, or oh, well, they don't got enough money because they're from the hood. Like, assumptions. We should be at the point where we should have to take a test to implement, so people know that this is not something that you just pass on. This is not something to just be a preference. This is something that is a need. This is something that has to happen. This is safety.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think so. I have two things to recommend. The first one would be to have listening tours. I would call them within different communities and students, because they're going to be the ones who are going to tell you exactly what type of help they need from you. So they're going to be the ones to like best tell you what they need. And then second, from a university standpoint, I'm going to bring it back to like the money conversation. I think it would be really great if the university were to create some sort of anti-racism like action fund where students can directly receive or apply like for money to do actual work. And I think that process should be as straightforward as possible. They shouldn't have to send in like millions of documents just to receive that money. I think if they see or they want to take action, like let's say I host a rally, but they need equipment, then they should be able to just go to the fund and say like, we're going to do this, and then get the money and then actually be doing the work. Because a lot of the time, like students do want to do the work, but they don't have the resources for them. And so I think having a fund that directly connects students to money will go a long way in helping them.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, but I am going to echo and extend that message. Because things do come down to money at the end of the day. We need a student activism fund that students can pull from, students can get jobs out of, you can fund protests out of. But while we're funding student activism, let's fund some of the departments on campus that do this work like they do this work. Let's finally increase the Multicultural Center budget. Let's hire more employees for that department. Let's move that department from a small space to a large space, right? Because if we want departments to do their job, they need money to do their job. I would also say, since I'm talking about increasing funding for departments, let's increase the funding for UAP, which we know works hard to repair retention rates for minorities. And since I'm talking about the budget, let's increase counseling services budget. You know, we are dealing with students, especially minorities, coming from urban traumas. We are living in a very chaotic world right now. These protests, the killings, we need professionals to talk to work through these emotions. So let's increase counseling services, MCC, UAP. Let's get a fund going. And it's about time we move from social justice month to social justice year round. I don't want to hear 15,000 programs jam-packed into November. Let's spread them out. It's okay. We can have social justice in January, SESU. We can have it there. It's fine. And let's start honoring the people that have been doing this work for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. There have been people on this campus who have been fighting for activism since before I was born. It's time to honor those people while they're still here, give them their flowers, and really give them a larger platform, and maybe even name some buildings after some Black people. I ain't just gonna say that.
I love that. My mother was in Mr. Barber's first SEOP class in 1973. So yes, I'd love to see a building named after Jim Barber.
I second that.
Any third or fourth or okay. With that, I know that we could go on, and I knew this was not going to be a short journey. There's so much more to say, and as I said earlier, we are going to have more forums, trust me on this one. I want to thank all of you. You will have gift cards and compensation coming your way for your time today, so I just wanted to say that publicly. And I want to thank Simone for that. I want to, again, thank you all. You have been wonderful. I know that right after this session, there is an event that is happening scheduled from 2 to 3 in the Southern Squad, joining our voices for racial justice, where Southern is invited to participate and contribute by signing a banner honoring the important cause of racial and social justice at Southern and beyond. So stay tuned for that. Thank you. Muchísimas gracias. You've been phenomenal. I honor all of you. Good tidings, good journey, be safe. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.